Hello and welcome YouTubers. I'm Michael Candalo. Today we're going to configure our on-prem Mecm server that we deployed in our earlier training video session. We first shout out to Samuka Kani and Lucan for subscribing to my channel. If you want to be mentioned in my next video session, please do subscribe to my channel. It is the only way to keep encouraging and supporting me in continuing making these wonderful contents for you guys. Let's dive in. So if you remember, we have in our environment, we have two DCs, and then we have Mecm on-prem server, and recently we did update the server itself, but now we have another update. If you click on update your site, so we have Configuration Manager 2203. So last time we did an update for the hotfix, and later on we will do another update for the Configuration Manager that was recently released, Configuration Manager 2203. But here in this training video session, we gonna first of all configure this on-prem Mecm server so that it can do what it is meant for. Because what's the use of deploying this beast in the environment and not knowing what to do with it? So that's the focus of our training video session today. So I'm going to close the dialog box because we'll be updating the site later on in another video training session. So the role of Mecm architect is to primarily deal with designing and implementing Mecm infrastructure in the enterprise. So the Mecm engineer will be responsible for providing design, deploying, configuring, and support of desktop technologies in a distributed environment. It will also be responsible for software distribution and patch management, as well as building and deploying software packages to workstations. But now, how many sites do we have when it comes to the deployment of Mecm? So we have three sites primarily. We have the Central Administration Site, or CAS. It's actually an optional site in Mecm hierarchy. It doesn't support client assignment. It requires SQL Server database and support up to 25,000 devices as per Microsoft. Then we have primary site, which is a mandatory site in Configuration Manager. And then we have secondary, like in our instance, we have the primary site. So it's a mandatory site in the Configuration Manager hierarchy. So we have secondary site. It's an optional site in Mecm hierarchy. It's used to manage devices in a remote location where bandwidth is a constraint. So if you have constraints in terms of bandwidth, then you can deploy a secondary site in a remote location. But Mecm is not alone on the market. You have some competitors. You have competitors such as IBM BigFix, Arturis, Avanti Landesk, and Taichum. These are the ones that I know. There might be others over there, but these are the ones that I know that are competing in terms of market share. So remember, before we deploy our MECM server in our previous training video session, we did create a container in Active Directory. So let's add to where that container is. Gonna go to Active Directory users on computers, view, advanced features, and then systems. There we go, system management container. And when you look, this is what happened in. So when you look at this system management container, we have our site, which is published here, and also the management point. But now, if you see the system management container already created in Active Directory, do not create it again, because there are no new Active Directory schema extensions from Configuration Manager. If you previously extended the schema, an earlier version, you don't have to extend the schema again. Because when you extend the Active Directory schema for Configuration Manager, as it is in our case, it is a forest-wide, one-time, irreversible action. And then to extend the schema, the AD schema, you must use an account that is a member of the schema admins group, as it was in our case. We managed to extend it because the account that I'm using is part of the schema admins group. You find in other environment, they extend the schema later after deploying the configuration manager, but it is always best to extend the schema prior or before you start to configure your sites and hierarchy settings. After you extend the schema, what happened then? The Active Directory global catalog replicates throughout the forest. You create system management container one time in each domain that is a primary or secondary site. This will be used to publish data to Active Directory. What I was saying was that for us to deploy a CAS, so we should have a site in London and another site in Johannesburg. So in such a way that we want to have the overall management, then we can bring these two sites by implementing the CAS model. So what am I trying to say? When you have two different primary sites, for instance, one in London and another one in Johannesburg, the only way to connect them for management purposes is to create a CAS, Central Administration Site, as we spoke about it earlier on. But relatively few situations require CAS implementation, because few situations require multiple primary sites. As a refresher, so we have three type of site in MECM: Central Administration Site or CAS, primary site, and secondary site. So as I was saying, a secondary site is used if you have a slow link between physical locations, but if you have a reliable fast link or reliable fast network link, then the secondary site is not needed at all. But in most cases, deploying a single primary site is sufficient. A primary site is used to manage clients only, and CAS is used to manage sites that manage the client's machine. But if you don't want to install the secondary site, then you can use a local distribution point or a branch cache instead. But very often, an organization will decide that a primary site to be sufficient for the client management needs of the organization. So, we've been speaking a lot about features of MECM and different types of site. Let's configure this best so that we can proceed with our training. So I didn't speak much about the logs because we'll get to a certain stage whereby we're having a lot of issues, and then we'll have to troubleshoot. Then we'll go through the logs and check what kind of log that we have to pinpoint and what kind of errors that we have in order to start resolving the issues that we encounter. So where do we find the logs? And what is the tool needed to read the MECM logs? So let's go to local disk, program files, Microsoft Configuration Manager. So we have tools. The best tool used to read Configuration Manager logs is called CMTrace. So double click. Oh yes, do you want to make this program the default viewer for log files? Yes. Alright. So now this is our default log file reader. That's the best, Configuration Manager Trace or CMTrace. This is the one that we'll be using to read our Configuration Manager logs. Alright, so the first step once MECM is deployed into the environment is the creation of boundaries and boundary groups. First and foremost, configure boundaries and boundary groups. So where do we go? We go to the administration workspace, hierarchy configuration, and then we have boundaries and boundary groups. So here we have default boundary group. Boundaries, we have none. So what are boundaries and boundary groups? It's actually a logical grouping that identifies the network location of clients in the Configuration Manager hierarchy. So we have 5 boundary types in MECM. We have IP subnet, Active Directory site, IPv6 prefix, IP address range, and VPN. So as I was saying, the first step is to create boundaries and boundary group. So let's create boundary. We can do it. We can either do it here, right clicking, or we can go there and create boundary. So I'm going to select the boundaries and click create boundary. So how many types of boundaries do we have in MECM? We have IP subnet, Active Directory site, IPv6 prefix, IP address range, and VPN. But I'm going to use Active Directory site. And then I'm going to type the name of my boundary. Active Directory site name. I'm going to browse. Remember, this we did it in our one of our training video session when we were implementing the Active Directory. Click OK, click Apply, and click OK. Now the next step is to create the boundary group. So select or right click, create boundary group. So I'm gonna name it KMT boundary group. The following boundaries are members of this boundary group. which boundary created. Let's add it. Click add. Remember, KMT boundary. Click OK. Reference. What are we going to use this boundary for? Use this boundary group for site assignment. Thank you. Okay. System site servers. Click add. Select. Click OK. Apply. And OK. As you can see now, system site count, we have 1, member count 1. So we are set. As I was saying, boundaries must be members of the boundary groups. Boundary groups help clients find their assigned site and content servers. Double click, properties. As you can see, it's use this boundary group for site assignment. So boundary groups help clients find their assigned site and content servers. Okay. So boundaries define the network location on your intranet that can contain devices that you want to manage. A word of caution again, we cannot manage directly from the central administration side. It doesn't have clients. Remember, doing anything in MECM is a lot of work and requires a lot of patience. Things do not happen as quickly as we might like, and then things show up after a period of time once all the processing, especially in multiple sites, the replication is completed between the different servers, especially when you have implemented a CAS and multiple sites. So you have to be a little bit of patience for things to start showing up in MECM. But here my environment is small, it's just a testing environment, so that's why you see things are happening quickly. So the next step is, once we have created boundaries and boundary groups, the next step is to deal with discovery methods. We want to enable discoveries for our environment to find the resources that we have. So still on the administration workspace, discovery methods. So as you can see, the only discovery method that is enabled by default is the heartbeat discovery. So you might be asked in one of the interview sessions, how many discovery methods do we have in MECM? So we have Active Directory Forest Discovery, Active Directory Group Discovery, Active Directory System Discovery, Active Directory User Discovery, Heartbeat Discovery, and Network Discovery. So how many in total? We have 6. So how do we find clients and resources? This is done through the discovery process. Because remember, one of the main purposes of implementing Configuration Manager is to centrally manage client computers and devices. So we need to find the client first and place a client agent on them before starting to manage it. Discovery is the process by which Configuration Manager learns about the things you can manage. So let's go and find our resources. So you have, remember, we have the DC1, DC2, we have our Ops Manager, which is offline now, we have our SharePoint server, which is offline, we have our Exchange server, which is offline too, and other clients. So we need to go and find these devices before we can start managing them from our Mecm server. So select Active Directory for discovery, right click, properties, enable, click apply. Do you want to run full discovery as soon as possible? Yes. Click OK. Active Directory group discovery, right click, properties, enable Active Directory group discovery. Come here, add location. Okay. Browse, entire domain, click OK. It depends on how you're going to lay it out. So I'm going to name it Active Directory Group Discovery. So KMT Active Directory Group Discovery. Click OK. These I leave default. Click apply. Yes. Okay. So Active Directory System Discovery. Right click, properties, enable, click path, browse, entire domain. So you might select or use depending on the requirement of the organization. My lab is very small, so I can also select this one, discover object within Active Directory groups. Okay, these tabs, leave them default. All right, click apply. Yes. Okay. Active Directory user discovery. Right click, properties, enable Active Directory user discovery, location, the entire domain. Click OK. Select, click OK, apply. Yes. Okay. So this one, if you have the network discovery, if you have a larger environment, then it's better to do it when most of the stuff are not working. It's actually taking a lot of resources, but I'm going to enable it because my environment is very small. So right click, properties, enable network discovery. You have subnet tab, domain, click apply, click OK. So this one, if you want to discover non-AD computers, then once it is enabled, it's going to go and find out these resources. Remember, Heartbeat Discovery is client initiated and not server. It is the only discovery method that tells the server that the client is still alive on the network. It doesn't discover new resources. It's initiated by clients, keeps current records, marked as active in the SCCM database. So network discovery. Network discovery provides you with information about your network topology that you are not able to acquire with other discovery methods. It's for switches, routers, printers, SNMP devices. It's very noisy and resource intensive, often considered discovery of last resort. Can find objects not available in Active Directory, such as workgroup computers. Then let's head to, we have created boundaries and boundary groups. We have enabled our discovery methods. So let's go to assets and compliance workspace to find out if we are getting our resources in our MECM server. So on the assets and compliance workspace, let's go to devices. Voila. So we're getting something here. We have discovered our DC1, DC2, our Exchange server, our MECM server, our Operation Manager server, our SharePoint server, our Windows 10 client, and our Windows 10 client. But when you look, all these devices don't have an MECM client on them. So we'll deal with it later. But so far we have discovered our resources by using various discovery methods and creating the boundaries and boundary groups. So user collections. So you can see all the users that we have. So they've been pulled out. So you have all the users, they've been pulled from Active Directory. If you click on user collection, all user groups. This is all coming from Active Directory, all users. So you can see all the users that we have. So if we had a user in 80, after a while, it will come up here. So user collection, all users and user groups. Okay. Device collections. All right. So all our systems. These are default. These three are default. So these three come by default. And then these are our resources that we have discovered. They are now brought in into MECM server. But now, for us to start managing them, we'll have to deploy the client on each and every one of them. So now that we have our resources discovered in MECM, in our next video training session, we'll be speaking about device collections. How to create device collections so that we can start managing our different types of resources that we have discovered in our MECM. I'm Michael Candolo signing off. Stay humble, stay hungry for IT knowledge. Until next time, stay blessed.